So have you ever considered that nobody really gives a shit about you? Nobody really gives a fuck about you. Now, in this video, I'll explain why that might be a good thing to realize and why I'm not as serious as I sound right now. First of all, the disease of self-importance is probably one of the biggest things, one of the biggest stumbling blocks to any sort of attainment and achievement that you might think of. Now, how does this tie in with nobody gives a shit about you? Well, because traditionally we really think that because we think of ourselves as very important, we think that other people think of ourselves as very important. This is a very traditional flaw of perception. We think this way, therefore other people should think this way as well. But just think about it. How many people do you really give a shit about? That guy in a, I don't know, party that made a fool of himself. Like, do you really give a shit that he made a fool of himself? That guy, your classmate who's now successful, do you really give a shit about his success? Not really, and not to paint like with dark colors. It's another point that I'm trying to make. I mean, sure, your mom might care about you, your dad might care about you, your siblings, your girlfriend, boyfriend might care about you, maybe only until you break up with them. But, so siblings, yeah, there's that. Friends, you might have some lifelong friends. But let's face it, you have a few people that really give a shit about you. Most people don't really care. And it's only natural that they don't. But it's not really natural for you to assume that all the other people really do. Now, let's look at what kind of basically flaws of character and kind of miniature psychological diseases you can create for yourself when you start thinking that you're very important and that other people, like a lot of people, give a shit about you. What will happen is you will start really limiting yourself in many various ways. Why? Well, because if everybody cares about you, you really have to keep that image really clean, don't you? You can't do stupid shit, Failing is not an option. You gotta look cool, You gotta be successful. What is success? Well, success is what, is generally considered as successful, as good, what other people think is good. Can you see how easy it is to step into all of these delusional territories? This is why the realization that nobody really gives a shit about you is such a healthy realization to have. What that means is when you're in a social meeting, you can just go out and have some fun and talk to people. Why? Because nobody gives a shit about you. If you look like like a fucking loser or whatever, people will forget you in a few minutes, or at the very, like, if you completely make a fool of yourself, they'll probably forget about it the next day, unless they film you and put you on YouTube. Even now, some of the shit that I'm saying might be stupid. Who gives a shit? You don't give a shit. If I say something stupid, you might react, in a moment and say, oh, what an idiot. What is he talking about? That's it. I mean, I'd probably have to pull out my dick to get some attention, but even that won't work. I mean, I'd probably have to be a hot chick, to actually get attention from stupid shit like that. So basically, nobody really gives a shit. And that is actually liberating. You should enjoy that. Really savor that thing in your mouth, whatever. Because, now, I'm making a lot of jokes in this video, and the whole topic is very edgy, right? But I do this, one reason is for clickbait. Another reason is because it's a very important topic to understand. It's important because the day you start truly realizing this is the day that you will open yourself up more to the world. What that means is you won't be so needy, so restricted, so limiting in yourself, because, it is one of the biggest reasons why we limit ourselves. We usually limit ourselves not because of our own perceptions of ourselves, but because we imagine how if we try to do some things, we might look stupid or we might fail. It might be painful to our ego and all these things. And once we realize that actually to attain something, to do something, it takes a lot of these rejections, failures, all of these things, we tend to get afraid. I mean, not us exactly, our ego, which is, that part of us that is the filter, that is the persona, the mask that we use. We want that mask to be important. That mask has an inbuilt self-importance mechanism. It wants that everyone would give a shit about it. It wants to be praised and all of that. And by the way, like I mentioned a lot of negative examples to actually let you in, on the how it's actually working out. But take a look at another thing. We get suckered into becoming successful because we think that other people give a shit about us. So it's not only about not being afraid to fail, because nobody gives a shit about your failures. In reality, it's your overinflated self-importance that only cares about that. But even the successes, some of the successes that we do might not even be something that you really want to do. You might literally, if you're not careful, spend years and years trying to develop and do something, and then realize that nobody gives a shit. And if you did it only to impress others, sooner or later you'll come to realize that nobody really cares about that. It doesn't really matter. Your family, your friends might, when you achieve something, they might go, "Oh man, good, yeah, a pat on the back." That's it. Your years are spent for a little pat on the back at best. Other people, your past classmates, your ex-girlfriends or ex-boyfriends, they will not care so much. They might even resent you for being successful. Like, that's how it literally fucking works. So, see how fucking delusional self-importance is? I'll probably title this video that nobody gives a shit about you, but it's really about self-importance, overinflated self-importance, which is one of the biggest causes of our suffering. It really is. And not only suffering, but also the reason why we get lost in our desires. We want others to give a shit about our achievements so much that we start acting out, to get that achievement based on what is acceptable, and all these things which lead us to these paths which are not really our paths. Those paths are somebody else's. Those paths are cultural ideas, other individual ideas, and all these things. So be careful about pursuing a path that is not really yours simply because you want somebody to give a shit about you. And also be careful to not get stuck like in your head and not do anything because you think that if you do something, people will really give a shit about you. Nobody gives a shit about you. Whatever you do, most people will not care about that, or they will care for a very short while. So ask yourself, is it really worth it to spend so much time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears to get that little bit of attention? Is that what you really want? I'm pretty sure not. But consider this, and you might find that your real desires, your real goals are not even that close to the ones that you thought about. Like, if you fully accepted the idea that nobody gives a shit about you, if you win or if you lose, nobody gives a shit, maybe you would do something differently. I don't know, that's a question for you to answer. I hope this was helpful, and if you do give a shit about me, do like and do subscribe. And if you give a lot of shits, join my Facebook group, because that's where all the action is at. Cheers.